Good evening, and welcome once again. Tonight, we won't be riding beneath the eternal blue sky, but walking through the dim lantern light of old Kyoto along narrow lanes, where the scent of incense mingles with falling cherry petals. We're going in search of a figure who seems born of dream and discipline alike, the Geisha, the artist of silence and song. Not the painted doll of Western fantasy, nor the submissive shadow imagined by rumour, but the woman of poise and precision, trained from girlhood in music, dance, and the unspoken art of presence. She was both mystery and mirror reflecting the beauty, restraint, and sorrow of a fading world. In her gestures lived centuries of custom. In her gaze, the quiet ache of transience the Japanese call mono-no-aware. We'll trace her path through the tea houses of Gion, the apprentices' hidden dormitories, the nights of practice when the shamisen strings cut into her fingertips, and the dawns when she walked home alone as the paper lanterns dimmed. We'll listen for the whispers behind the elegance, the patrons and poets, the strict mothers of the Okiya, the coded hierarchy of grace that ruled her every move, and we'll ask why, long after her world began to vanish, her image still haunts the screens, the novels, and the modern imagination, why the geisha endures as both symbol and soul of Japan's elusive beauty. As always, I'd love to know where you're listening from and whether the moon is rising where you are. If you enjoy these journeys through the quiet corridors of history, do like this video and subscribe for more bedtime stories where memory, myth, and the living heart of culture meet. Now then, light the lantern, draw the shoji closed, and listen. The night in Kyoto is waiting. Imagine for a moment that you're neither a hero nor a poet, not some tragic soul carved into history. You're just a child, small, quiet, and for all purposes, for sale. You don't realize it yet, but your price will be weighed in grace, in silence, in how well you can smile while yourself is slowly erased. You'll be admired, adorned, rehearsed, and eventually applauded, but never truly known. The world surrounding you will name you art. What it will never admit aloud is that art can also be merchandise, and in time you'll learn that those two things often mean the same. You are 6, perhaps 7. You're not sure which. There's no ritual to mark the crossing, no clear border between what was and what will be. One day you're your mother's daughter, the next you belong to the Okiya. No one asks if this is what you want. That isn't how the world operates. You're told it's an opportunity, a proud calling, a path out of hunger, a path forward. But you're not walking it. You're being led down it, hand in hand with someone who needs the money more than they need your company. That someone is often your mother. The Okiya isn't cruel, at least not in the way people usually mean. You're not beaten. You're not shouted at. You're simply absorbed into the rooms, the schedule, the structure. You are the faintest presence in the house, and your quietness is your greatest virtue. The older girls ignore you. The maid sometimes nods. The okasan, the house mother, watches you as if appraising a bolt of cloth, not a breathing child, and in a sense she is. You are raw material, an investment. Future profit balanced on 2 small legs. You sleep on a futon in a shared room, not because it's comforting, but because it's efficient. You're given modest meals, enough to keep you alert, never enough to indulge. Your kimono is plain, your obi knotted in the style of servants and children. The dazzling robes you've seen in painted scrolls belong to the Maiko, and you're nowhere near that yet. For now you wash dishes, sweep floors, run errands, and observe. Observation is your real education. No one gives you books. You learn through repetition and proximity, from the tilt of a bow, the stillness of a smile, the precision of silence. They call you a trainee, but you are not training. You are waiting. You are enduring. The house owns your hours and your body, though not in the way outsiders might imagine. This is not a brothel. No one touches you. But that doesn't mean you're not a commodity. You're being shaped into something that can be sold. And shaping begins with reduction, the steady smoothing away of whatever makes you unique. Your laugh is too loud, your questions too curious, your posture too loose. Each of these is corrected, not harshly but persistently. The discipline is quiet. The standards are absolute. Your parents signed a contract, or rather, the Okia wrote it and your parents bowed. Now you are in debt. This is explained in terms you barely grasp. The house paid for your entry. In return, you will repay them over time. The total covers your bed, your food, your future lessons, your kimonos and cosmetics, your mentors, your instruments, your every breath until the ledger evens. The number is vast. You're not expected to understand it, only to accept it. From the instant you crossed that gate, your freedom began to gather interest. Now and then, new girls arrive, each as small, as silent, as wide-eyed as you. You do not befriend them. You do not play. There is no space for childishness here, no hour for laughter or softness. If a girl weeps at night, she is ignored. If she weeps by day, she is corrected, firmly, though without cruelty. Tears are indulgence, so is comfort. You are being crafted toward grace, and grace is born not of gentleness but endurance. Here, endurance is wrapped in silk and sealed in ritual. At first you ache for your family, your mother's voice, your siblings' quarrels, the smell of miso simmering on the hearth, but that ache dulls. In time, faces blur. Perhaps you forget them. Perhaps you simply stop trying to recall. Memory becomes another weight, and you are already carrying enough. Instead, you memorize tasks. You rise before dawn, sweep, serve tea. You are told where to stand, when to bow, how to listen. You do not ask when you might go home. No one ever does. And that silence is its own answer. Outside, people bow to the geisha who share your house. They praise their walk, their laughter, the quiet way they make men feel significant without ever saying much. You watch them with awe and confusion. They appear powerful, queens of a muted realm you barely comprehend. What you cannot yet see, what you are not meant to see, is that they too are bound. Their beauty is real. So is the cost. You do not yet grasp the difference between duty and choice. You will. For now, you perform. Even as a child, you learn that worth grows as your performance smooths. Gratitude must be soundless, struggle unseen, and any yearning for something beyond this house must be buried like a broken comb. It is not forbidden, it is simply irrelevant. They tell you that one day you may become a Maiko. That is the reward, the dream. But dreams handed down by those who profit from them are treacherous things. You picture yourself in crimson silk, face painted white, lips curved just so. You imagine applause, admiration, meaning. What you do not imagine is the weight, the debt swelling quietly, the rules coiling tighter, the exhaustion deepening. For now, you're only beginning. Your universe has shrunk to the walls of one house and the expectations that echo inside it. The city outside hums and flickers, but you will not belong to it. You will drift through it like mist, admired perhaps, but never touched, never known. And in the hush before your name is changed and your smile becomes part of your costume, you start to sense what it means to belong. Not as a daughter belongs to a family, but as a doll belongs to its shelf, displayed, maintained, brought down only when required, You're not a geisha yet, but the machinery has begun to turn, and machinery in Edo, Japan does not stop once set in motion. It proceeds, step by polished step, until there is no retreat. Your schooling does not begin with books, it begins with silence. Before you perform, you learn to watch. No one explains, you are meant to absorb. Your eyes follow the older girls, how their sleeves never brush the floor, how their steps glide as though the tatami itself should not be disturbed. They rarely speak. When they do, it is measured, soft, brief. You wonder whether they are fearful or merely weary. Eventually you stop wondering. There is a room used for lessons, though it feels more like a stage under endless rehearsal than a classroom. You sweep it before sunrise. The tatami must remain spotless. Mirrors shine so clear they could judge you. Instruments are set with such care they seem to breathe. When the teacher enters, you kneel, back straight, eyes down. She needs no greeting, your presence suffices. The first sound she makes is the sharp crack of a folded fan against her palm. It is not anger, it is instruction. Here, everything begins with posture, not because it is most important, but because everything depends on it. Your spine must be straight but never rigid, your hands graceful even when they tremble, your gaze steady and contained. You learn to kneel for long hours without shifting, to bow to precise depths, to remain motionless when stillness is required. These are not easy lessons for a child, but you're no longer treated as a child. You are treated as potential, and potential only matters if it can be shaped. There is dance, though it bears little resemblance to what outsiders might imagine as dancing. Your motions are measured, deliberate, so controlled they nearly blur into stillness. Each gesture carries weight, the flick of a wrist, a tilt of the chin, the careful unfurling of a fan. You're taught to occupy the space fully without ever claiming it. Every movement must seem effortless, enough grace to be admired, never so much as to command. You're to be ornamental, not imposing. A whisper of beauty, not a voice. Then comes music. The shamisen becomes your constant shadow, your instructor and your disguise. Its strings bite into your fingers until they harden. You play again and again, not for pleasure, but because precision is the only proof of worth. A single mistake on stage is never forgiven, though the reprimand arrives without words. You're told simply to begin once more, and so you do, endlessly. Repetition becomes your element, not punishment but atmosphere, the very air you breathe. There is calligraphy, which is less about ink than about restraint. You hold the brush as though balancing breath itself. Each stroke must glide, smooth and decisive, like a footprint left in snow. You're not only shaping characters, you're shaping yourself into someone fit to bear them. The brush extends your will, though your will must remain invisible. You're being trained to leave an impression, but never a mark. Etiquette is not a subject, it is a language. You learn when to speak, when to pause, when to smile without revealing teeth. You're taught how to pour tea in silence, how to serve with humility, how to laugh softly enough to be forgotten. These are the unseen threads that hold your world together. No one writes them down, but everyone obeys them. You discover quickly that ignorance is not innocence. It is weakness. And weakness is corrected, sometimes with a glance, sometimes with the sharp edge in the teacher's tone. You are not rewarded. At best, you are acknowledged. A nod, the absence of criticism. The lack of reproach becomes its own reward. Soon you stop searching for praise. You learn that excellence is expected, not celebrated. It isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The house has no interest in your confidence, only in your precision. Mistakes are handled swiftly. If your fan slips mid-dance, you recover without expression. If your bow lacks depth, you repeat it. No one shouts, no one scolds. The lesson resumes. Later, you may be pulled aside. Your misstep will be reenacted, every inch of it examined, so you can see precisely where you failed. Then you will practice until failure no longer exists. Improvement is assumed. Apologies are irrelevant. Only correction matters. Sometimes when the teacher leaves, the older girls exchange quiet words. You listen from the edges, unseen. Their talk is soft, tinged with irony and fatigue. Clients, robes, schedules, gossip. No one speaks of dreams. No one speaks of leaving. You begin to realize that endurance itself is the curriculum. The longer you can hold a smile, the more value you acquire. The less visible your effort, the more perfect your transformation. In rare moments alone, in the bathhouse before dawn, or the narrow garden behind the house, you allow yourself to breathe like a person again, briefly. Then you return to being a work in progress, a product under construction. The silence follows everywhere. It fills your lungs. It trains you to listen more than speak, to yield more than assert. It hardens into armor, and slowly something within shifts. You stop waiting to be completed. You begin to accept that you never will be. Perfection isn't a goal. It's the process itself, endless, exhausting, essential. You start to view your body as a tool, your smile as a tactic, your voice as something rationed, allowed only in moderation. This is where a geisha begins. Not in glamour, not in secrecy, but in repetition, in observation, in the long, quiet erasure of self, so that something smoother, safer, more beautiful to others can take its place. You are being shaped for performance, and here, performance is everything. You're 13 when they decide you're ready, or rather, when the house concludes its investment has matured enough to yield return. You've scrubbed floors, bowed until your spine ached, studied, endured, obeyed. Now, it is time to be seen, not understood, merely displayed. Your debut as a Maiko is no celebration. It is a transaction, a declaration of worth. You are now marketable, and marketable must be maintained. The transformation begins before dawn and lasts for hours. First, the hair. Not a wig, not yet. Your own hair is pulled, combed, slicked with oil, sculpted into elaborate arcs and knots, then lacquered to perfection. It cannot be washed often. The style must endure for days, sometimes weeks. You sleep on a wooden cradle to keep it intact. Discomfort is constant, but you're trained to conceal it. You learn to drift into shallow dreams, your neck suspended above the futon, your body frozen in poise. Rest becomes negotiation. Then comes the makeup. Your face is coated in white rice powder, dense, chalky, spectral. It clings to your lashes and seeps into your skin. A narrow strip of bare flesh remains at the nape of your neck. A deliberate suggestion meant to entice in ways you do not yet understand. Your brows are repainted, your lips reshaped into a red bow, only the lower one filled in, marking you as new. You're not meant to appear human, you're meant to appear perfect. The kimono follows, exquisite, suffocating. It takes several women to assemble you. Layer after layer of silk is arranged with mathematical precision. The sleeves fall past your knees, colours vivid, youthful, theatrical. You can scarcely move, but they tell you you're beautiful. Then the obi, wide, stiff, a sculpted burden tied high on your back. It hauls your body into an elegant imbalance, forcing your stride into short, measured shuffles. Here, beauty is not ease, it is discipline disguised as grace, effort so complete it becomes invisible, and the shoes, tall wooden akobo sandals like stilts carved from punishment. Each step strikes the ground with a hollow clatter, a sound announcing you whether you wish it or not. You must learn to walk without looking down, without wavering, without betraying pain. Your feet will blister. The straps will carve red lines into your skin. You will bleed, and you will keep walking. Your first appearance is choreographed to the second. You are introduced to patrons, senior geisha, and the clients of the house. You bow again and again. You smile until your cheeks tremble. You recite the practiced words, greetings, politeness, deference, soft laughter in the right places. Opinions are not permitted. Rest is not permitted. You exist to be admired, and admiration must be earned through composure. From this day on, your hours are no longer yours. Morning begins before sunrise with lessons in dance and music. Afternoons vanish into errands, fittings, rehearsals. Evenings belong to the house. Performances, banquets, pouring tea, entertaining those who pay to feel important. You are always watched. You are always performing. Even stillness must be deliberate. Posture is performance. Silence is part of the illusion. You learn quickly that the paint on your face is not armor. It is expectation, pressed into your pores. If it smears, you've failed. If you sweat, you've failed. If your eyes wander at the wrong moment, you bring shame upon the house. You grow hyper-aware of every motion, every breath drawn beneath the painted mask. Your smile becomes instinct, carved into muscle. Your silence evolves into strategy. Patrons often remark on your beauty, your restraint, your precision, your charm. You bow, thank them, and never mention that the wig throbs against your scalp, that your stomach is empty because the obi is tied so tightly you cannot swallow. You do not confess that your feet are torn open, your fingers ache, or that your eyes sting from too many sleepless nights. They are not paying for truth. They are paying for illusion, for the seamless grace of something that pretends not to hurt. Your duty is not to be yourself, but to become the reflection others wish to see. Graceful but never assertive, playful but never forward, intelligent but not intimidating. You memorize names, preferences, stories, and weave them back to each man as if he were the most fascinating soul alive. Your success is measured in his comfort, your failure in his disappointment, a dropped smile, a faint sigh, a conversation that cools too soon. There are fleeting moments when the mask slips, in the mirror of a dressing room perhaps, or in the dark glass of a shop window on your walk home. You catch your own reflection and nearly don't recognize it. You wonder if the girl beneath the powder and fabric still exists, or if she was simply another layer peeled away for the sake of the role. But you don't linger on that thought. There is no time. The older Maiko offer advice, some useful, some laced with irony. How to handle the stare that lingers too long, how to hold a smile when it begins to fracture, how to accept correction without showing pain. No one talks about escape. No one even jokes about it. Leaving the stage mid-performance is unthinkable, and life itself has become an unending performance. As a Maiko, you occupy a liminal place, neither child nor woman, adored but not respected, visible but not known. Every inch of you is calculated for effect, the angle of your head, the rhythm of your laugh, even your innocence rehearsed. You must enchant without inviting, entertain without disrupting, embody desire while remaining untouchable, and so you continue. You dance until your knees shake. You serve tea with trembling hands. You memorize melodies you'll play 100 times for people who will never remember your name. You walk until your feet bleed, and when someone comments on your elegance, how fortunate you must be to wear such beauty, you bow, deeply, sincerely, because you understand what they never will. None of it is for you. The kimono is exquisite, the weight is unbearable, and you are expected to carry both with grace. You wake before dawn again. Your body aches in places long unnamed. You adjust the padding beneath your robe, though you know it won't help. The robe is still too tight, the shoes still too tall, but you rise anyway, because the air itself is obligation and debt never sleeps. You are a Maiko now. Your worth has grown, and with it, your debt. Every lesson, every song, every polished gesture is recorded in the house ledger. Every silk sleeve, every string of pearls, every visit from the hairdresser is noted, totalled, and quietly added to the sum that defines you. It isn't a number you're shown. You simply feel it, each time someone reminds you how costly you are. The okiya paid for your debut, your teachers, your kimono, for the hands that dressed you, for the woman who painted your face white, for the one who combed your hair until your scalp burned. They paid for the carriage that took you to your first engagement, and the sack poured for guests as you bowed and smiled. None of it was free. It was never meant to be. You're told, gently but firmly, that one day you will repay it all through appearances, performances, banquets, through conversations spun late into the night, while your fingers cramp and your face remains serenely fixed. They say your effort will balance your cost, but the arithmetic is always blurred. Your fees go to the house. When you attend an event, the client pays them, not you. The sum is divided, a portion for expenses, a portion for the okasan who manages your schedule and image, a portion for your debt, and a tiny fraction, you're told, saved for you, for a future self, independent and unowned. You believe in her for a while, eventually you stop. There is no bargaining. If the house says you owe more, then you owe more. If silk prices rise, so does your debt. If a performance disappoints and a patron asks for a discount, the shortfall appears beside your name, never the house's. You bear the cost of imperfection. The system, after all, allows for no errors. When illness comes, and it does often, the doctor's visit is charged to you. When your kimono tears, the repair is charged to you. Even the fan you drop in rehearsal becomes a line in the ledger. You learn to be careful. You learn to hold your breath when others cough. You learn to endure blisters quietly, because rest is expensive, and mistakes are unaffordable. There are stories murmured by the older Maiko, traded in whispers between lessons, about girls who aged out before the numbers ever cleared, women who served the house for 15 years and left with nothing. Not in disgrace, not in anger, simply gone. Their names faded from the books like ink rubbed from parchment. Their labour had value, their absence did not. You are reminded often that this is not slavery. You are told that you are admired, respected, even envied. But admiration does not pay your balance, and respect is not the same thing as freedom. You're allowed small choices, perhaps your dance partner, perhaps your preferred tea, but never the terms of your own existence. Those decisions were made long ago, and not by you. Some clients ask polite questions about your life, your training, your earnings. You bow, you smile, and you answer with the softness of practiced humility. You never tell them that the coins never reach your hands, that their payment vanishes into the same house that dressed you and painted your face, that your laughter, your poise, your very presence are part of an account kept in your name but never yours. Occasionally you do well. A banquet runs smoothly. A wealthy patron requests you again. The house receives praise. On those rare nights, the okasan may nod in your direction, a tiny acknowledgement that your numbers are rising. But that doesn't mean your debt is falling. It only means the house is satisfied, and when the house is satisfied, your work continues. The reward is not release, it is continuity. Your prize for good performance is more to perform. The incentive is never freedom, only endurance. You begin to understand that solvency is a horizon that drifts whenever you try to reach it. The structure was never designed for escape, only for survival. You know Maiko who have advanced to full geisha only to find the same rules rewritten in elegant language. Their debts smaller, their obligations larger, the illusion of autonomy replacing the illusion of progress. But illusion by any name is still smoke, and yet you stay, because there is nowhere else to go. Because leaving would mean beginning again with nothing, and you started with less than that. Because debt is heavy, but it is familiar, and you've learned to carry it without breaking. Every once in a while the music aligns, your hands remember without thinking, and for a heartbeat you forget that this life is a balance sheet. You do not despise the house, you do not despise the system. There is no room for hatred, only arithmetic. You perform, you serve, you endure, and you whisper to yourself that this is temporary, that someday the numbers will even out, your name will stand alone, unfollowed by debt. But that day is not today, and until it comes, you bow, you smile. You walk in borrowed shoes, sleep in borrowed peace, and sing borrowed songs for borrowed affection. You are not striving toward freedom, you are striving toward zero, toward the quiet erasure of owing nothing at all, and for now, that must be enough. There comes a time, early on, when you start to believe that grace is something innate, that the elder geisha possess a natural composure you simply haven't earned yet. You watch them smile with flawless calm, glide through a room without a single misstep, make awkward men feel interesting with one subtle tilt of the head. It all seems effortless. That illusion is the point. What you do not see, not at first, is the repetition behind that serenity, the blistered feet hidden beneath the lacquered sandals, the quiet strain beneath the unshakable poise. You imagine they were born like this. They were not. They bled for it, just as you will. You learn quickly that charm has little to do with honesty. Charm is engineered, a deliberate mechanism, not a personality trait. You are taught how to listen with fascination, even when the story meanders nowhere, how to let a man feel clever without ever offering him an original thought. You master the timing of nods, the soft laughter that never exposes your teeth, the art of asking the same question in new words so that your curiosity seems fresh each time. This is not flattery, it is architecture, and like any craft it must be refined until it becomes muscle memory. Small talk becomes your arena. You wield it like a fan, decorative, precise, controlled. You are warned not to be too intelligent, too quiet, too assertive, too bland. You must hover perfectly between clever and coy, responsive yet restrained. Say too much and you appear improper. Say too little and you seem ungrateful. Every phrase is a performance, every silence a calculation. You're not speaking to reveal anything, you're speaking to guide a mood. You pour sack as though it were ceremony. 2 hands steady the bottle, the angle exact, the stream unbroken. You memorize the hierarchy of service. Who drinks first, who must be addressed with what reverence. Forget a title, hesitate for a heartbeat, refill the wrong cup, and no one will correct you aloud, but the error will linger. You'll sense it in the quiet shift of conversation, in the way the air cools, in the glance the Okazan gives you later that night. You will not apologize, you will simply try harder. Most of your evenings dissolve into listening, men talking about business, fishing, mistresses, their wives, their ailments, their ambitions. They laugh too loudly, contradict themselves, retell the same anecdotes, then accuse you of forgetting them. You nod, you encourage softly, you lean in just enough to signal interest. You never correct them, you never yawn, you never show fatigue, especially when it claws at you. You learn to read a room without seeming to look at it. You know who sulks in the corner, who tries too hard to impress, who's had 1 cup too many. You feel tension before it blooms into conflict, and you diffuse it. A light question, a joke disguised as observation. a flicker of humour that never crosses into insolence. You are not the focus, but you are the architecture of focus. You are the reason the evening feels smooth and the first to bear blame when it doesn't. The greatest failure is to be dull, or worse, forgettable. If a guest leaves without recalling your name, you have failed. If he remembers you only for an awkward pause, the house will quietly reassign you to lesser events. Visibility is currency. You must shine softly, bright enough to catch the eye, never so bright as to blind it. There is no space for eccentricity, no prize for authenticity. You are not here to be known, you are here to be pleasing. There are nights when you might as well be invisible. A room full of men who barely notice you, who speak over you, around you, through you. You still pour the sake, you still refill the bowls, you still smile. Not because they have earned your warmth, but because the house has. Because even your silence is labour, even your presence is service. And though they ignore you, someone is always watching. Now and then cruelty surfaces, a drunken guest, an older geisha grown careless, a remark about your posture, your accent, your weight, your laugh. Too stiff, too quiet, too cold, too dull. You bow, you smile, you agree. Then you go home and practice harder. There is no space for wounded pride. Grace here is the art of not flinching. You do not complain. No one wishes to hear a tired geisha. No one pays to witness discomfort. Your duty is composure, endless, elegant, accommodating composure. You do not interrupt. You do not yawn. You do not correct the man who mangles your name 3 times in one evening. You just keep smiling. Because here, endurance and professionalism are indistinguishable, and perfection cannot be told apart from silence. As time passes, the mask begins to feel less foreign, or perhaps your face simply forgets what it was like to move without it. You stop questioning the absurdity of the ritual, how a room full of powerful men depends on your poise to feel powerful themselves. You start to believe, somewhere deep beneath exhaustion, that their amusement truly does outweigh your fatigue. That the smooth surface of an evening matters more than the uneven edges of your truth. And yet, buried beneath all the lessons, all the restraint, there remains a small defiant ember, a quiet awareness that you are more than this disguise. That your grace is not a blessing bestowed, but a craft you built with blood and repetition. And that craft, whether praised or ignored, has value, even if no one says it, even if no one ever will. So you go on, you adjust your sleeves, you rehearse your lines, you step back into the room, bowing, smiling, making exactly the right amount of eye contact. You tell the story again, you pour the sake again, you laugh again. Not because the moment is joyful, but because the moment requires it. And after all this time you have learned to endure beautifully. There is rhythm now to your nights. The door slides open, lanterns tremble, and you enter with the practiced elegance of someone who has spent years learning how not to exist too loudly. The men glance up, some curious, some indifferent. You kneel, bowing low, neck inclined just enough to show humility without surrender. You smile, not too long, not too bright. The performance begins before anyone speaks. They call it flirtation. You call it calibration. You gauge the room without seeming to. You notice who has drunk too much, who hides a tremor in his hand, who avoids your eyes. You store each observation silently, the way you file away pain. These men are not enemies, but they are not allies either. They are your audience, and your survival depends on their illusion of control. Everyone knows you are not to be touched. But that doesn't mean your boundaries are not tested, only that the tests have become more inventive. There is a line you must walk, close enough to allure, far enough to remain untouchable. You pour drinks with hands that never tremble. You compliment with practiced warmth. You laugh in a tone tuned perfectly to suggest interest, never promise. This is not seduction, it is containment. They admire you, or rather, they admire the version of you they have imagined. They construct fantasies out of fragments, and you let them. They comment on your voice, your posture, your lips, as though these things were crafted for their pleasure. You smile as if it flatters you. You nod as if you haven't heard the same words 20 times this week. Your work is not to feel. Your work is to mirror desire, to reflect it back without letting it cling. Some clients are gentle, some are cruel, most are forgettable. They come to the tea house burdened with boredom, ego, loneliness. You are their purchased answer, though they could not name the question. You make them feel seen even when they barely look at you. You make them feel clever even when they speak in circles. And when they leave, stumbling, inflated by second attention, they thank you, as though you've done them a kindness. And perhaps in a way you have. Once in a while, one lingers in your mind. A man who is actually polite, who asks something genuine, who does not demand laughter as proof of affection. You hope he returns, not because you care, but because it is easier to endure the act when your scene partner is bearable. Sometimes he does, sometimes he does not. Either way, you remind yourself never to mistake kindness for connection. You are not here for either. There are moments when a guest leans too close, when compliments shift into suggestion, when a hand lingers just a breath too long near your wrist. You deflect with practiced elegance, a small tilt of the head, a new topic, a gentle reminder of boundaries cloaked in courtesy. You've learned to sense the moment before it turns, to redirect without offence. If you're fortunate, he understands. If not, you smile anyway. There is always another man to entertain, always someone convinced he is the first to fall in love with a geisha. Love, you've learned, is the most common misunderstanding. They fall not for you, but for the image they helped construct. The graceful mystery who listens without interrupting, who laughs softly, never judging. They imagine sincerity behind the mask, something meant only for them. They never realize that the mask is the truth, and everything else was hollowed out to make room for their fantasy. You've seen men cry, confess secrets they never shared with their wives. You've watched them boast, plead, sulk and sulk again. Each emotion receives its proper echo. Never too much sympathy, never too little. You're not their conscience, you are their mirror, and mirrors, as you well know, do not answer back. Propositions arrive constantly, some delicate, some crude, some come with gifts, others with vows. Your refusals are graceful, your tone immaculate. You never shame them, even when they deserve it. You've seen what becomes of geisha who speak too plainly, labelled difficult, cold, ungrateful. Their bookings dwindle, their names are quietly replaced. The system does not punish you for defending yourself. It punishes you for making anyone notice you have something to defend. You're not permitted to look weary. You may work 16 hours straight. No meal, no rest, no seat longer than a moment. But the instant your smile falters, someone will see it. You may be poised, captivating, even brilliant, but exhaustion breaks the illusion, and truth is not profitable. The truth is that you are exhausted most of the time, but the act is non-negotiable. Back in the dressing room, you remove the layers carefully, wiping away the white rice powder that settles in the basin like ash. You massage your scalp where the wig pressed too long. You ease your shoulders, unclench your jaw, release your performance for a few fleeting minutes. You are not smiling, you are not graceful. You are only a woman, sore, hungry, unseen. Then you bathe, then you sleep, then you wake and repeat. You tell yourself not to take it personally. They do not forget you because you were dull. They forget you because they were never truly looking. You are part of the room, warm, elegant, perfectly placed. You existed for their pleasure, and once the evening ended, your purpose dissolved. They remember the sake, the melody, the joke they believed was theirs. But your face, your voice, your name, those were never the point. This becomes your creed. Your presence must feel unforgettable, even when you are not. Because what they recall is never you. It is how they felt while you were near. If you've done it right, they leave feeling significant, even if they never once wondered who you really were. You're a full geisha now. The word carries weight, not only in the silk brushing your skin or the controlled ease of your movements, but in the way people speak to you, in the way they bow, in the quiet expectations that hover before every request. You have completed the lessons, endured the trials, ascended through the soft machinery of the house, and yet nothing feels lighter. Your name is not your own. It was chosen by the house, calculated for beauty, lineage, and sale. Elegant when whispered, refined when printed, admired when patrons murmur it with practiced familiarity. But it is not the name your mother once called at twilight, not the one you scratched into the dirt when your hands were still allowed to rest. That name is gone, replaced by something useful. Your address belongs to the Okia. You sleep on bedding that is theirs. Your hairstyle, your wardrobe, your calendar, all belong to them. You may walk through the city, but only with permission. You may speak freely, but only in ways that reflect well on your keepers. You may decline a client, but not often, and never without cost. They call it tradition. The word sounds holy, as if carved from reverence. But tradition, lived, means obedience. It means knowing your place and remaining within it. It means accepting that the house fed you, dressed you, trained you, and therefore owns you, not by cruelty or force, but by custom and contract. The Okarson governs your career, negotiates appearances, approves purchases. She is not your enemy. In some ways, she is your lifeline. But her care is conditional, her affection administrative. If you fall ill, she calls the doctor. If you falter, she schedules correction. You are an investment, well maintained, but still capital. You've heard tales of geisha who left their okia without sanction. A few succeeded for a season, moving in with patrons, opening small tea houses, founding schools. Most returned, not from weakness, but because the world beyond has little use for women trained to serve, smile, and vanish. You may be celebrated on stage, but independence is a language you were never taught. You are permitted conversation, laughter, charm, art. You are not permitted love, not the kind that disrupts schedules or debts. If affection distracts you, if a man consumes too much of your time, your emotion becomes liability. And liabilities are quietly removed. Sometimes a wealthy patron offers to buy your contract to become your sponsor, your dana, your protector. In theory, it's freedom from the house. In practice, it is a change of ownership. Your room may grow larger, your kimono finer, but the lock remains. Every triumph still belongs upward. If you are admired, the house is praised. If you falter, the house absorbs the shame and hands it back to you. Nothing about your image is independent. Your grace, your discipline, your composure, all credited to your upbringing within these walls. You may shine, but only as reflection. When new Maiko arrive, you are expected to guide them, not with softness, but with precision. You correct their posture, their phrasing, their tone. You teach them the rituals, enforce the very rules you once despised. It isn't hypocrisy, it's continuity. The system survives by teaching itself. You train them not to complain, not to question, not to hope too loudly. There are days when you forget your captivity. You walk the streets in full attire, feel eyes following, admiring, respectful, almost awed. You feel powerful, desired, in control. Then you return home, See the ledger, the schedule, the Okusan's notes, and remember, power is your costume. The house is both your origin and your cage. You have mastered the illusion of choice, smiling at the right angle, bowing at the right depth, accepting flattery with perfect humility. You know how to appear autonomous while staying obedient. You've done it so well that even you sometimes believe it. But at night, without the makeup, as your body folds into the futon, you remember. You're not free, you're not independent. You're remarkable, yes, but only within boundaries drawn for you. The world praises Geisha for artistry and composure, but the praise is never yours. It belongs to the house, and the house belongs to a tradition that was never built for your voice. You are revered, and you are possessed. You live among women, always have. From the first day you entered these halls to your longest nights in the dressing room, their faces surround you. You know their steps in the corridor, their laughter behind the shoji, the sigh when the hairdresser pulls too hard, the murmured apologies to the teacher. You're not alone, but being surrounded is not the same as being close. There is no time for sisterhood as others imagine it. No shared midnight secrets, no weeping on shoulders, no whispered dreams of escape. Time here is portioned between lessons, clients, sleep. Even rest is supervised. Conversation is brief. Glances speak more than words. Affection exists. Quiet, structured, unsentimental. You're not friends, not exactly. But you're not enemies either. The woman who adjusts your collar may also mention your lateness tomorrow. This is not cruelty. It is maintenance. The system works best when everyone behaves, and behavior is everyone's duty. Older geisha instruct you, some with kindness, some with steel. You accept both as investment. Criticism means someone still believes you are worth improving. The younger Maiko look at you with awe and apprehension. You are their future, painted, composed, perfected. You see yourself in their trembling smiles, their careful postures, their quiet endurance. Sometimes you encourage them, sometimes you don't. They will learn as you did, that kindness is welcome but never guaranteed. The system doesn't require cruelty, just distance. Still, laughter happens. Real, sudden, human laughter, sparked by something small and absurd, a torn hem, a drunken poet, a shared mistake. In those moments you remember youth, remember what it felt like to be a person. Then the laughter fades. Someone is called away. Faces return to composure. Resentment lingers quietly, not born of malice, but fatigue. You resent the girl with better patrons. She resents the elder with more freedom. It is friction, not hatred. A constant undercurrent you all feel. You are competing even when pretending not to. But there is solidarity too. When the Okusan is harsh, when a client crosses a line, when someone falls ill and the others quietly cover her shift, there is a silent understanding. Only those inside the walls truly know what it costs to smile through pain, how heavy the kimono feels after midnight, how strange it is to be praised and invisible at once. Sometimes in the mirror, you meet another woman's eyes. No words, just that flicker of mutual fatigue, mutual endurance, a brief glance that says, "I see you, I know." Then the wig is adjusted. The next guest waits. The show resumes. You wonder sometimes, what if you all stopped? What if every geisha refused to pour, to bow, to perform? But you never speak it. Revolt is unspeakable. Solidarity must remain silent. You all hold the same structure, and it holds all of you. There are women you love, not romantically, but as extensions of yourself. You have seen them survive heartbreak, illness, loss. You have witnessed their resilience, and they have seen yours. You may never thank them aloud, but you share the burden of survival. That is its own form of intimacy. Sometimes someone leaves, retires, marries, vanishes. Her absence is noted, not discussed. Her name mentioned once or twice, then folded away. The house continues, the work continues. Another girl arrives, another schedule fills. The quiet machinery turns as it always has. You're not alone. You're simply unseen. You exist parallel, a network of women balancing silence and grace. You support one another because no one else will. But always with restraint, always aware that emotion earns no reward. The closest thing to sisterhood is knowing that none of you are free, and somehow that is enough. You endure together, wordless, weary, unwavering. You share mirrors, meals, burdens. You age beside one another. You repeat the same dances, whisper the same corrections, nod at the same polite falsehoods. You survive together, not always kindly but always knowingly. No one tells you when it ends. There is no farewell, no curtain call. You simply stop being requested. 1 month the engagements thin, the next the calls cease. You watch others chosen in your place, younger, brighter, untouched by time. You still move with elegance, still smile with precision, but something invisible has shifted. And though no one names it, everyone feels it. They call it stepping back. They call it transition. They call it change. But the truer word is disappearance. Because one does not retire from being geisha, not in the way people imagine. There is no pension, no ceremony, no acknowledgement of all the years performed. One day you are celebrated, the next forgotten. You remain, breathing capable, but no longer of value. And in this world, without value, there is no visibility. Your body has long known the truth. It has whispered it for years. The nights have settled into your bones. Your knees ache when you kneel. Your back locks when you rise. The wig leaves bruises at your temples. Your skin rebels against the powder it once wore proudly. You've learned how to hide the changes, how to mask fatigue, how to smile through the fine lines. But patrons notice, and bookings notice more. If you're careful, political, you may shift into teaching. You pass on what you know, how to walk, how to serve, how to perform, how to pretend. It is strange becoming the voice that once corrected you. You see yourself reflected in the young, their hunger, their fear, their shimmering hope. You speak gently or not at all. You let them air as you once did. Some thank you, most do not. That too is part of the cycle. Some women open tea houses, respectable, graceful second acts. But running one requires capital, diplomacy, and the pretense that it was your choice to stop. Old clients visit, drink your tea, and look away. The glamour is gone. The labour remains. Others fade quietly. They return to families, if any remain, or to rented rooms that shrink each year. The kimono too costly to mend, the makeup dry, the instruments gathering dust. You are still yourself. Only now, without the costume, without the appointments, you are difficult to define. People avert their eyes when you pass, not out of pity nor shame, but uncertainty. You no longer serve a purpose they recognize. No one asks what it was truly like. No one wishes to hear about decades of discipline, of ceremonies mistaken for kindness, of humiliations disguised as praise. The world remembers geisha as emblems, graceful, remote, timeless. You remember them as women who bled inside their sandals, who smiled through fevers, who played the shamisen with trembling hands. Sometimes you try to speak of these things, but your words drift past like steam. The illusion outlives the memory. You do not regret the years you gave, or rather, you refuse to admit regret. What purpose would it serve? You did exactly what you were shaped to do. You performed with precision and endurance longer than most. You lasted, and that perhaps is its own quiet victory even if no one records it. but the silence that follows your disappearance, that is heavier. The machine continues, unbroken, as though you were never part of it. Sometimes you see the posters, the programs for performances you once led. You recognize the movements, the gestures you practiced until your fingers cramped, the fan flicks and bow angles etched into your body. But the name beside them is different now, someone newer, someone who still fits the image. You do not resent her. She's not the problem. She's simply next. There is no instruction for what comes after. You are no longer a product, but not quite a person either. Not in the way others mean when they speak of choices. You are a remnant, a faint reflection. Your name still stirs a flicker of memory in certain rooms, but mostly you are someone people half recognize. You have not failed. You have merely aged. And here, that alone is enough. The years you surrendered to elegance, to silence, to refinement and restraint do not accumulate into anything tangible. They dissipate. What remains are habits you cannot discard. A slight bow upon entering, a practiced smile when voices rise, answers phrased as questions. You still keep your back straight even when unseen. You still pour tea as if judged for steadiness. You still kneel properly though it aches. No one tells you what to do with this grief, and yes, it is grief, though no one dares name it. It is not loss of youth exactly, but mourning for the years spent performing perfection. The beauty they admired was never yours. It was leased, displayed, then reclaimed. Now only echoes remain, applause fading in a hall you can no longer enter. You continue, you wake, you wash your face, you walk the streets and nod politely to the women who still perform. Sometimes they know you, sometimes they don't. You never correct them, you never explain, you don't have to. You know, and knowing will have to suffice. They still call you beautiful. At least that is what the paintings insist, what the poems echo, what the plays repeat. You remain an emblem of elegance, a silhouette draped in silk, lips shaped into a perfect bow, eyes lowered in eternal composure. They say the geisha was the soul of grace, the muse of artists, the fantasy of restraint. You were mystery, refinement, perfection personified. The ideal woman, or at least the idea of one. What they never recall is the drag of the wig, the way it pulled at your scalp until your skin screamed. They forget the sleeves heavy with embroidered expectations that trailed across tatami floors as you danced. They do not remember the meals skipped, not from vanity, but because your obi was drawn so tight you could barely breathe, let alone eat. They do not remember the cold, that silent, creeping cold that lived inside your bones while you waited outside in winter air, too polite to shiver, too professional to complain. The portraits endure, the truths do not. They never paint the red marks circling your ankles left by wooden sandals that never quite fit. They never sing of your fingers, raw and split from hours upon the shamisen strings. They never choreograph dances around the hollow place where your own voice used to live, your opinions, your unguarded laugh. Your suffering doesn't fit the story, so it is erased. Your fatigue leaves no monument. There are no carvings for the nights you wept behind folding screens, body aching in a dozen places, knowing you must perform again tomorrow. There are no tributes to the hours spent smiling at someone else's joke, nodding at slurred compliments from the drunken and the powerful. No shrine honours the silence you kept while others called you graceful, composed, obedient. What remains is only the image, the legend. You were graceful, yes, but only because you were taught never to show pain. You were charming, because charm was the only safe reaction. You were desired, but never quite respected. And now, years later, the version of you preserved in art and folklore is the one they speak of. She is remembered. You are not. It is a peculiar fate to be reduced to an aesthetic. You were a person once. You had thoughts, perhaps even dreams, but over the years the persona devoured the self. When they remember you now, they don't ask who you were. They ask how you moved, how the silk shimmered as you turned, how the light caught your painted mouth beneath the lanterns. Your inner world is irrelevant. Your performance endures. You became an emblem, not by ambition, but through repetition. They needed someone to embody elegance, and you were convenient. They needed an image to market, to romanticize, to anchor their nostalgia. And there you stood, painted, dressed, arranged, perfect on the surface, hollow beneath. But no one ever looks at a mask and wonders about the face beneath it. The stories they tell are always the same. A geisha with a secret, a geisha with a tender heart, a geisha who loved too deeply, or vanished after one flawless dance. You've seen those plays, you've heard those songs. They are always beautiful and always false. You were never mysterious. You were simply tired. You were never enchanting. You were efficient. The fantasy endures because it is useful. It flatters the spectator. It allows admiration without consequence, affection without understanding. They can adore the image of you without confronting the cost of its creation. The hours, the bruises, the silence, the exhaustion etched so deep it became another skeleton beneath your skin. All of it disappears behind the fan you held with such practiced grace. You are mythologized, not mourned. That is the quiet tragedy. You gave everything, your time, your youth, your strength, your voice. And what you received in return was a caricature, a memory softened by candlelight, a woman-shaped outline for others to colour as they please. No one asks if you were happy. No one asks if you were free. They only ask how you managed to stay so still. You glimpse your legacy in the girls who follow, the Maiko rehearsing the same movements, binding their hair the same way, reciting the same lines. They do it with the same poised elegance you once believed in. They do not yet understand that it isn't grace, it is endurance, it's repetition, it's necessity. You wish you could tell them what beauty really costs in this world, that it isn't a blessing but a burden tied neatly with a silk ribbon. But you don't. No one warned you either. Sometimes people ask where all the geisha went, why there are fewer now, why the tradition fades. They speak as though something precious has vanished. Perhaps it has, or perhaps it's a quiet form of release. Fewer girls sold into silence, fewer women aging into disappearance, while the world clings to the fantasy of what they once were. Maybe what's vanishing isn't beauty, but the system that demanded it at any price. You were beautiful, but that was never the most interesting thing about you. It was simply the only thing they chose to notice. Perfection had a cost. You just didn't see the bill until your own body began to collect it. It started small. A knee that throbbed after too many hours of kneeling, a rash along your neck where the makeup seeped into your pores. You told yourself it was ordinary, part of the discipline, but discomfort became habit. Then it became background noise. Then it became you. Your hair, for instance, was never meant to endure what it did. In those early years, they used your own, pulling it tight, shaping it into impossible forms, lacquering it with wax and oil until it gleamed like glass. It was called art. It was also damage. The crown thinned from strain, the scalp flared with infection that came and went with the seasons. You could not wash it properly. You could not sleep easily. When the wigs came, they were not relief, but exchange. Heavier, hotter, pressing down like a sentence you could not appeal. Your feet bore their own share of tradition. The Okobo sandals were meant to be heard, not worn in comfort, wooden, unpadded, and perilously tall. They forced your steps into tiny, careful fragments that from afar looked elegant, but left behind blisters, swelling, and a posture warped by years of compensation. You bled into your socks some nights and still bowed at the door as though nothing had happened. Your teeth followed next. That white mask you wore, the flawless porcelain surface, was chemical, not innocence. It seeped into your breath, your food, your skin. Some girls grew sores around their lips, others watched their gums retreat. Dentistry was an afterthought. Appearances were policy. You smiled because it was required, even when the effort hurt. Meals were rare and shallow. Your obi cinched so tight that even breathing was a discipline. Full portions were unthinkable. You nibbled rice, drank tea, learned to live on emptiness. No one weighed you, but the message was written everywhere. Elegance meant lightness, and lightness meant denial. You taught yourself to ignore hunger, to keep performing even as your stomach cried out mid-rehearsal. Malnutrition doesn't crash in like a wave. It seeps in like fog, in dizziness, fatigue, and that chill that never leaves, even in summer. You lived with constant stress, though no one dared to call it that. You were expected to stay serene, graceful, composed, even when the client was cruel, even when you were feverish, even when sleep had forgotten you. Your days were always in motion, either hurrying towards something or preparing for it. No pause, no release. There was no off. Your smile became a coping mechanism. Thinking too deeply could undo you. Sleep itself was performance. You rested with your head on a wooden block to keep the hairstyle perfect. You slept shallow, aware of dawn's summons. Some nights your muscles twitched from overuse, your joints burned, your eyelids still flickered with candlelight and lacquered floors. Even when rest was allowed, your body no longer remembered how. Exhaustion became your natural state, maintained, never healed. Your hands told the story no one else ever cared to read. The shamisen carved thin grooves into your fingers, calligraphy stiffened your wrists, the endless pouring of tea, the folding of napkins, the endless choreography of politeness. None of it seemed demanding alone, but repeated endlessly. It reshaped you. The joints thickened. The knuckles rose like small mute scars. The hands that looked so fragile by lantern light were, in truth, worn-down tools. Graceful, yes, but used to the bone. And beneath it all there was always compression. Every part of you was contained, arranged, suppressed. Your waist was bound, your scalp weighed down, your skin sealed under paint. You could not stretch fully. You could not move quickly. You could not even breathe deeply inside the costume of your own role. The illusion of effortless beauty demanded it, a constant restraint not only of motion but of self. Over the years, you forgot what it felt like to inhabit space freely, to exist without measuring the angles of your body against someone else's expectation. When people speak of geisha, they speak of beauty, not of damage, of poise, not of pain. They don't ask what it did to you to live like this for decades, to wake each morning inside a body trained for stillness, to carry a smile that never belonged to you. No one wonders how your spine endured the weight, or if your jaw ached from holding its practiced curve. No one imagines you vomiting quietly between courses, or limping home beneath the weight of silk and silence, or flinching at the sting of bath water after a night of unseen bruises. All they remember is that you were beautiful. And you were. Because you had to be. Because not being beautiful meant not being booked, not being remembered, not being fed. Because the entire system was built upon a single conviction, that your appearance was your tribute, your body the vessel of someone else's ideal. They said it was art. They said it was culture. But what it truly was labour refined into ornament. Every gesture, every layer of silk, every tilt of your head was proof that devotion could be measured by discomfort. That elegance was nothing more than discipline in disguise. They taught you that your worth was inseparable from beauty, and that beauty itself required suffering to remain pure. Your reflection became a product polished by endurance. They told you that if you worked hard enough, the grace you wore would become your salvation. But grace was never meant to save only to sell. You endured. You didn't have a choice. You were a symbol of grace, yes, but you were also a labourer, and not the kind anyone applauds. There were no contracts, no applause that lingered past the night, no rest days, no safety net. There was only tradition, a word that meant obligation disguised as honour. You carried it all quietly, as though silence itself were part of the uniform. You had no union, no pension, no protection. You had only expectation. You were told that devotion was its own reward, that perfection was the only proof of gratitude, and so you gave your body to the rhythm of repetition, the same bows, the same rehearsals, the same unspoken understanding that the cost was never yours to set. In the end, your body surrendered piece by piece, not in collapse but in erosion. It broke in increments, in small ignored warnings, in discomforts rebranded as routine. You didn't notice when the harm stopped being temporary. There was no moment of breaking, only a slow surrender. Pain became background noise, then habit, then the shape of your existence itself. You weren't built to last, only to function, to shimmer briefly, and then to vanish quietly when the shine dulled. You mastered every rule, every gesture, every invisible expectation of composure. You learned the steps, the bows, the right way to tilt your head, to pour sake, to laugh exactly on cue. You memorized the seasons, the songs, the unspoken order of names and glances that mapped out the hierarchy of every room you entered. You obeyed every command, absorbed every correction, endured every humiliation dressed as lesson. You gave your entire life in exchange for a version of beauty that was never truly yours to begin with. And through all of it, you smiled, because that was the rule. Because to hesitate even once was to risk everything you had worked for, even if what you had worked for was nothing more than another evening, an event without incident, a night where no one shouted, no one reached too far, no one noticed the fatigue behind your smile. You were told that grace would protect you, that composure could deflect cruelty, that elegance could soften the blows reality delivered. But grace was never a shield. It was an act, a costume stitched from restraint and repetition. And acts, no matter how flawless, always end. When you're gone, they remember the outline, the drift of silk through a doorway, the hush that followed your entrance, the way you moved through a room like moonlight made obedient. They remember how you made them feel important, amused, adored, as if your very stillness existed to affirm their worth. They remember the illusion, not the hours that built it, not the strain behind the bow, not the hunger or the fear, or the constant arithmetic of staying relevant. Institutions remember what flatters them. They forget everything that doesn't. If your name endures, it's called legendary. Not because anyone truly knew you, but because it once sold tickets, because a patron once dropped it into conversation like a rare collectible, gleaming for a moment in borrowed pride. They call you a symbol of another age, a relic of refinement, a whisper of elegance from a time more graceful than this. They say your silence was charming, your obedience divine, your restraint a virtue. They call it culture, they call it tradition, they call it art, as if submission were beauty, as if endurance were choice, as if you were fortunate to have lived as someone else's ideal. But you were never blessed. You were disciplined. You were trained to vanish behind the perfection you embodied. You were valued not for who you were, but for how flawlessly you disappeared inside the image they adored. You became everything they wanted, and in doing so, you ceased to exist. Even now, the institution endures. The okiya remains. The rituals continue, untouched by the women who fed them. Another generation of Maiko slips into your shoes, adjusts her sleeves, and learns to smile exactly as you did. She is taught the same lessons, corrected in the same tone, praised for the same obedience. Your name, when mentioned at all, is offered as proof that the system works, that devotion leads to success, that sacrifice leads to beauty. They call you an example, though they never say of what. You're not bitter. Bitterness was trained out of you long ago. It serves no purpose here. You're simply no longer necessary. And perhaps that, in its quiet way, is a kind of freedom. No more schedules, no more rehearsals, no more faces to please or dances to perfect. There is peace and stillness, even if it came too late to be savoured. Still, you catch yourself checking your posture in the reflection of a shop window, answering questions with practiced evasion, smiling automatically when someone raises their voice. The performance lingers, etched into your muscles, woven into your breath. You carried it for so long that even solitude feels like a role. You're not sure who remains without it. The mask is gone, but its shape still lives in your skin. Memory fades differently now. You forget the names of patrons who once swore you changed their lives. You forget the laughter, the endless conversations repeated until they became script. And as those details vanish, so too does the illusion that any of it ever meant more than maintenance, a life of keeping something running that was never built for you to own. There will be no memoirs, no statues, no marble plaques etched with gratitude. Women like you leave no monuments. You lived between admiration and expectation, perfectly poised, perpetually unseen. You played your part. You made it look effortless. And then, like a candle at the end of a long evening, you dimmed softly, precisely, unremarkably as you were taught. Still, some nights you wonder, what might have happened if someone had looked past the silk and the silence? If someone had seen the girl beneath the mask, the one who loved the sound of rain on a paper roof, who once wanted to speak without measuring every word, who believed foolishly that being herself could ever be enough. But there's no use wondering. That girl was erased long ago. Not cruelly, just inevitably. She was never meant to last. You were remembered for your beauty, but the woman who bore its weight did not survive the applause. She was never designed to. And so this is the final bow, unwitnessed, unrecorded. Just a quiet exhale in a darkened room beyond the house walls, where the lanterns have gone out and no one is waiting. You breathe in, for once without a corset. You stretch, for once without consequence. And for the first time you exist not as a performance, but as something that cannot be owned. And that, at last, is yours.